That's great. Okay, good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can see my screen. If anyone can give me a thumbs up to make sure that you can see my presentation this morning, that would be great. Fabulous. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are going to make a start on what we're going to do today, talk about today. So this month we've decided we've talked a lot as a team, as a dyslexia team, about parking our pens this month. And what we thought would be nice would be to share some of those ideas of why we did that, and you know, what sort of activities we did in place of that, in place of writing in particular, and how we would still support those skills that we need to encourage writing and things. So just to let you know who I am, so my name is Samantha Buttle and I'm Head of Teaching and Learning at Dyslexia Sparks. I started with the charity in September of 2016, which was when the charity first came about and when we first set up. I am a specialist dyslexia teacher, so I work with dyslexic students on a regular basis every week on a one-to-one or a one-to-two basis, primarily encouraging the development of literacy skills. We do work with maths as well a little bit, but primarily along the literacy and the English side of things. I'm also a dyslexia assessor, so another part of my week is doing dyslexia diagnostic assessments, which is fabulous. I get to meet all sorts of young people, old people, adults. So there's a real mixed bag in the people I work with on a weekly basis. I am dyslexic myself, so I like to think that I've got a bit of an insight of some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. Maybe not all of them, but I have lots of experience, personal experience of some of these things that we will discuss today. Dyslexia Sparks, we are just a small charity. We are based just outside of Hull, so I do recognise some of the names on our list today, but I know there are people joining from further afield. We are a charity. We are a registered charity, and as I say, a lot of our work is working with children on a weekly basis through tuition. We also do those dyslexia assessments. We also do teacher training and that kind of thing, work-based placements, in terms of making adjustments in the workplace for people. We are a small little team, and you know, we do a range of different jobs between us to enable dyslexic people, whether they be children or adults, to achieve their potential and you know, support them through their dyslexia journey. So why should we park our pens? So as I said before, we had a bit of a discussion as a teaching team around pens and writing in particular, and obviously for dyslexic learners, those things can be quite traumatic. It is often a barrier to children and to learners. So why we wanted to do this, it originally came around an event that Speech and Language put on every year, but to highlight the importance of that talking, that interacting, and that listening as well. And some of the skills some of our students do find difficult, but language and words, they impact every part of what we do every day. So not just the writing, not just the reading, just general conversation. So we feel like putting our pens away for a short amount of time was really important to our students. The importance of speaking is to, you know, we do want to improve vocabulary. The importance of vocabulary in literacy is paramount, just through reading, you know, but also being able to understand that, but also being able to write as well. A lot of the curriculum is written around writing, being creative, using exciting words, those kind of things, and that doesn't always come easy to everybody. So being able to speak and use these things is really important. Being confident with new words. As a teacher, I found teaching vocabulary is really difficult. It's not something I particularly enjoyed in terms of the teaching process. I do think it's quite difficult to cover that, especially in a classroom environment. And obviously that barrier to writing, so being able to write words. Lots of the time our students have fantastic ideas, they can talk and say all these wonderful things, and the barriers go up the minute they're asked to write them down. I know from my own experience when I was a child, if I couldn't spell a word, even if it was fantastic in my story or whatever, if I couldn't spell it, I'd pick another one that was easier, that maybe didn't sound as great. So I had a strategy in place to cover what I was finding difficult. So it's thinking about, you know, what we're hearing from our students or our children, and is there a discrepancy between how they speak and the vocabulary that they're using and then what they get put on paper. And as I said, you know, being able to understand what they're reading and what's being read. The importance of listening. So throughout school, there is an emphasis put on this, particularly in the early years, but also sort of right up to GCSEs, where people have to do speeches, and then other students are asked to listen and ask questions about those speeches. So it does span right across our children's curriculum, but it's bigger than that. You know, these are long-term skills that we are going to need as our children grow and develop. Building relationships, not just the learning side, just building relationships between friends, family, work colleagues, school colleagues, anybody that they come across. So being able to understand others and what they're trying to get across to you, and you know, being able to listen means you can communicate better and give those things back. So a lot of this time that we decided to put our pens away for the activities we did in our classroom, we did lots of talking and listening to one another, and it's interesting to see how children and young people react to that, and how they get on with those things. When I was preparing for this and when I was working with the teaching team, I really looked into how many times do we need to hear a word before we can use it accurately, and there's a real difference of opinions on this. And obviously there's lots of things that need to take to be in consideration. So there's the age of the person, their previous experience, their exposure to language. So there's a million variables in developing language and developing vocabulary. So sometimes people were saying, well, children need to hear a word up to 20 times and then they can use that accurately themselves. Other people are saying, well, it can be up to 500 times that they need to be able to hear that word. So when we talk about the frequency that we hear certain words and certain vocabulary, you know, it's not as easy as just saying, right, we're doing this topic this week, here's some words, go off and learn them. The joys of English is that so many of our words mean different things in different contexts, and that's where confusion can be caused. Not just with dyslexic learners, just with anybody, but obviously that can also have a huge impact on learners who maybe have autism, and maybe quite literal in their thinking and their understanding of words in particular. So there's a real difference of each person, each child, each adult that's sat in front of you in how they will develop the use of new words and new language. A really great way to help develop language and communication is storytelling. So those of you who sat here with really young children, you're probably thinking, we do this every night, we have stories, we tell each other stories and things like that. That is just as valuable as our children grow up and get older. So right up to teenagers, They maybe don't want to do it in the same way as young children do. But storytelling is really, really valuable to developing language and vocabulary. It's also helps to develop the understanding of different types of sentences. So we have simple sentences, which maybe just tell us one piece of information. We then have more extended or compound sentences, which could be a compound sentence is two sentences that could be separated, but we put them together with an adjoining word, such as and. Okay, now that is taught really young with our children at school. So sort of from year 2, they will be expected to know some level of these sorts of things that I'm talking about. So when we listen to people telling stories, or we talk about stories, that they're learning all the time. They're taking those words, the sentence structure. Where do we take our pauses when we're telling a story? Do we put that in for dramatic effect? If you listen to somebody who reads quite monotone or quite robotic, it's hard to get the flow of a sentence or of the flow of a story, which can then impact on your understanding of that. So if somebody's talking about it and thinking about it and making it up off the top of the head, they'll hear those fluctuations in voices. Where do we naturally take those pauses for breath? And all those things impact writing, because that's where they learn that those breaks need to be in terms of full stops and commas and things like that, and that punctuation that is so vital in our writing. But from listening and telling stories, they can learn a lot from those things there. It said on the introduction to this that we were not going to put a focus on reading. So I've gone from the perspective of not reading a book, physically holding a book and reading it, which is obviously another barrier to lots of our dyslexic students. Lots of them don't enjoy it. Not all of them, but lots of them don't enjoy it. Lots of them find it tiring. Lots of them would not choose to do it in their free time for pleasure. So something that I personally really enjoy, and I do try and speak to my students and those that come and see me for assessments, is listening. So if they haven't got if parents do the storytelling with them, they can listen to books. And there's loads of ways you can do this now. Obviously, probably the most known one is probably Audible. There is a cost attached to that, but you can download books and you can listen to them. There's some fantastic narrators who really suck you in, and you can listen to their expression and things when they're talking about stories, and it brings them to life. So we're taking away that barrier of physically reading those words, that tiresome process that it is for some of our dyslexic learners, and we're exposing them to those exciting stories, stories that are probably more related to their age than if they're struggling with reading. They may be reading books that are not made for their age range. So being able to listen to those stories and still be associated with books that their peers are probably listening to or read themselves is fantastic. There's also a company called Listening Books who provide free audio books for those with different difficulties. So anybody who may have a difficulty accessing a book in a traditional way of being able to hold it and read it, whether it be dyslexia, maybe it be a physical disability that they can't hold a book anymore, they will provide free listening books for you. There's other ways of listening to books, like things like a Yoto, which is a little story cube. You get a little card with a story on it, and you pop it in and it reads it to you. There's lots of various other companies that do things like that. And again, you can buy the stories that look a little bit like a book on a card, and you can pop them in and listen to them. And all those things that I said about being read to are just as valuable. They are being exposed to that language, that vocabulary, those sentence structures. All those things are so vital to developing their writing skills as they get older. Being able to look at the words and follow a text whilst listening to it is also really beneficial for those that are struggling to read themselves. Another great way of encouraging words and vocabulary and storytelling is to use books with no words in. So there are some fantastic picture books available. These ones, afterwards I thought these maybe look a little bit young, but there are some other ones that are aimed at older students, older children, that would just get as much value from that, where they can look at the pictures that have already been created and create their own world from that, using that those descriptive words, that language, thinking about how they would build a picture, describing that to somebody else there as well. So looking at picture books, and again, this is often associated with really young children, pre-readers, but there are books available for older people, older students as well, that would be just as valuable to help develop that language and that vocabulary.
Other ways. I can't see the PowerPoint anymore. Is the PowerPoint meant to still be on?
Yeah. Sorry, is anybody else having a difficulty seeing the PowerPoint?
I can still see it.
Yeah, I can.
Right, sorry, just me.
Oh, hopefully you can. Hopefully you'll be able to find it. So other ways of improving vocabulary, there's lots and lots of things available in terms of technology. Students, children now, they're immersed in technology from a really, really young age. So there are things like the Word of the Day app, and there is a cost attached to that one. But it gives you a word every day that you get to try out. It gives you different meaning, not different meanings, different contexts that you can use that in and how you would use that. There's also this website here, Word of the Day Vocabulary Ninja. Again, very similar. They're showing you different ways of using words and how you could maybe bring that into your world, into your child's world. There's also lots of books available. So the one that I've put on the screen there is it's by Collins. It's a word a day. We've got some lovely books in our centre which are like a flip chart, and you can choose. There's no day, or it's not a calendar or anything like that. You can just flick through. They're really brilliantly illustrated, so you can look at that word, you can talk about it. There's examples how to use it, but the illustrations are fantastic to go alongside that, and you can really have that open discussion with children and young people about those words and when potentially you might use those words. When introducing new words and new vocabulary, as I said, there is a difference of opinions of how often we need to hear a word or use a word before we can use it accurately. So repeating new words and new vocabulary is really important. So saying them often, and repeating them in different contexts. So if it has got dual meaning, is there a way that you can use that in different situations and highlight that you're using that new word by creating those situations for them? Finding out about new words together is something that I really encourage when I'm teaching. I find it really difficult to give a good definition of a word sometimes. I sort of know what it is in my head, and I think, how am I going to describe that word? So, and what I don't want to do is describe it wrong so that they get a misunderstanding of that word. So in our lessons, we use Google, we use dictionaries too. Lots of my dyslexic students find a dictionary really difficult to use, to be able to find those words within a dictionary. It is an important skill, and I think it has its place, but there are other ways that I think children would be more engaging with that in the technology world in particular. So being able to find out new words, so we talk about them, we look at the definitions. Sometimes the definitions are hard to understand, so we look at the examples, and then we try and think of different ways that we would use those words. So we talk about it together, about the contexts of those. Really encouraging to ask about unknown words. lots of the time when children are reading, they may not understand one word within a text, but that might be a real key word that they need to understand the rest of what it is that they've just read. So being able to ask, you know, what does this word mean? How do I do that? And then that links with finding out about those words again, doing that together and being able to develop those parts of vocabulary. And just going back to that, the number of times to accurately use a word will vary with each child. And there is, like I said before, there's so many variables in that. So you might say a word once or twice and they've picked it up and they can understand that. You may say it 50 times and they may still need some support with that, and an explanation of that as well. Rhyming games are absolutely fantastic for helping with words and vocabulary. Also can have an impact on spelling as well. Just got to be careful around some of the rhyming words because not all of them are spelt the same. Some dyslexic learners find rhyming really hard to hear. So being able to identify rhyme anyway is an important first step. So being able to listen, where in a word do we hear that rhyme? How do I know these words rhyme? A lot of them confuse it with alliteration, so where they've got the same sound at the beginning. A lot of them think of that as rhyming because they sound similar at the start of the words. Again, with rhyming, there's lots and lots of, there's apps, there's games, all sorts of games, so card games, things like that. There's loads of apps available, but it can just be done anywhere. You know, you could just be out and about and sitting and talking about a word and saying what rhymes with that word. So light, what rhymes with light? And then you could have that discussion about, is that a real word? You know, might, height, blight. And then, you know, thinking of other words that maybe are not real, and how we know the difference between those. And if we do know them, what do they mean as well? So you don't need any particular equipment or anything like that. You could just sit in the car on a long journey, and again, you're talking about words and vocabulary, and all these things feed into literacy skills, their reading and their writing. There are so many other games that we can use to develop language development. There's all sorts of things available in terms of topic areas. You could have flashcards and word games to do with that. Great thing about flashcards is they've got a visual to go with that word, so there's something to associate it there with, especially if it's something excuse me, something they don't know or haven't seen before. So having that picture there to support that is really, really helpful. Words like games like Scrabble, again, obviously you've got to buy that game and you've got to have it, but there's things like I Spy that are just as valuable. You're also talking about the sounds within words, and it encourages the spelling skills and things like that because you're listening for those sounds within the word. Games like What Am I? So being able to describe something without saying the word. And again, you can buy games that have the clues and things like that, but you can just do that anywhere. You don't need anything special to be around you to do that. You can just look out the window, again, if you're in the car going somewhere. Other games like I went to the market and I bought, you know, and you're encouraging that development of a story, of a language, and building up a story and a picture to go with that. With dyslexic learners, that also helps with memory. So there's another aspect to that which is beneficial to dyslexic learners. You can also use topic games. So the image that I've put on there is a game we've got in our centre, and the kids absolutely love it. So for example, you could use colours. So they have to think of a colour with that letter, and they press the letter down, then they have to hit it before the timer runs out. You can use fruit, you can use transport, you could use a particular topic area in school if that's something, if there's something specific that you're looking at the time. It's a fast-paced game, so you're talking about language and vocabulary, you're looking at sounds and letters, but they don't feel like the pressure of I've got to pick up my pen and I've got to write this down. So it's a fun way of introducing those skills that we still need to continue to develop as our children get older. Talking is vital in terms of it's been said in lots of different ways, but if you can say it, you can write it is often the tagline that is given. And in the past, lots of schools put things like talk for writing in, so there was words which were attached to actions to help that storytelling process, and there's lots of value to those things. So, you know, if you can say and use this language, you're more likely to be able to write it or understand it if you're reading it. So talking and using these different words in different contexts is always going to continue developing. I think something really important, not just for young people, but for teenagers as well, is turn taking in conversations and knowing when it's their turn to talk. And that's something that can be quite noticeable when if that's not something that they have to do very often. So ensuring that they wait for those breaks in conversation and they don't talk over others, which links back to the listening side of things that I mentioned earlier. So encouraging the use of language around when you're talking to children and young people, open questions are really important. So we could say, what did you think of, and allow them to give us an answer. So what did you think of the movie? And they have to build that sentence. They have to think of what they're going to say and their opinion of that. Rather than a closed question was, did you like that movie? Yes or no? It was all right. Those are the different sorts of questions where you get a different type of answer. You're getting the same feedback, but they're putting that feedback in a different way, in a different context, and they're then able to go, yeah, well, I liked it when this bit happened, or no, I didn't like that, it frightened me. You know, there could be then talk around those words and that vocabulary linked to what they're used there. Lots of listening games available. So I put what am I on the talking side, but they also need to be able to listen in that game and think about what that is. Being able to just describe something without using the word of what it is can be really difficult for some students. Things like Simon says, so listening for that instruction. Is that instruction before whatever you tell me to do? So it also impacts processing, that processing speed, which impacts dyslexia, which goes for the same for musical statues, you know, waiting for that music to stop before you stop your body moving. So all these things are really important. Another game we use quite often in our centre is sound bingo, where they listen to sounds of things. So this is what would be based really young children, sort of foundation stage. They would do this. It's amazing how many of the older children really struggle to distinguish between similar sounds. And that is part of our processing, and that impacts our phonological awareness. These are all parts of dyslexic difficulties. So being able to hear the difference between a car and a motorbike, for example, they are very similar, but there are differences as well. And those are the common ones that come up in our games when we're playing things like that, and how we would discuss the differences between them. Telling a group story where you all say a line each, or you say the next sentence, again, is really good for listening, but also that creative, that vocabulary side. And good old Chinese whispers, really listening to something and trying to pass a piece of information on. And again, you don't need any specialist equipment for that. You can just do that, and that be part of an activity you could do anywhere. The other thing we talked a lot about in our lessons when we put our pens down for the week is something called morphology. I'm not going to go into this too much, but it's basically the study of words and how words are formed and put together. So it's the small units of words that come with meaning and what that actually means. So a lot of our tuition is based around morphology. Don't worry, you don't need to remember that word. But it's how we build words, and that helps us be able to use it more, and then that improves our understanding, and then we can use it effectively in our writing, but understanding it in our reading. So what does morphology actually mean? So I've used an example here, which is suffix ed. Okay, so suffix ed in English actually makes 3 different sounds. So it makes id, d, and t. So different words, in different words, it has 3 different sounds, which is why English is so complex. This is just one of the elements of English that we would look at in tuition. So suffix ed. So what is a suffix, first of all? So we're breaking this down. What is a suffix? Do they know what a suffix is? Why do we use a suffix? What does that mean? What does this suffix in particular mean? When do we use suffix ed? What is it used for? And which words will have them, would have it on the end of them? So we would talk about, well, it puts things into the past tense, and we use this then to help develop their understanding. So if there was a sentence that said, I planted it, that's already happened. So do they understand that? Do they know that? But that's what that ed does in that word. It changes that base word, that root word, and it gives it a different meaning. So when we start breaking words down into this, into these small parts, we know what the word plant means. Okay, I now know what id means. It means it's in the past. So when I put those 2 words together, and all this can come through speech and speaking, not just reading and writing. But if they understand that in speech and they understand why we put ed on the end, that will impact them when they are going to write something. Yeah, I'm sorry, and when we use this. Other examples, just really quickly, of this is suffix un. Okay, so suffix un is used for different reasons. So again, these 2 letters impact our understanding of words in different ways. So it can mean not, it can mean the opposite of, or the reverse of. So they might know what important means, but what does unimportant mean? It means the opposite. So if we understand the un and we know the important, we can understand that language development a little bit more. Something is undone. The opposite to would be unhappy, untie, those kind of things. So they might know that understanding of that base word, that root word, but what does these 2 letters that we've stuck before it, what does that mean? And then again, once they become confident with that, they can use that within their spelling, and understand it when they're reading as well. Supporting handwriting. So today was not about handwriting, and I continue with that. I'm not going to sit and talk about getting pens out, but there are other ways that we can support handwriting without picking up a pen. There's lots of ways we can do this at home and at school. So first of all, to develop handwriting, if you've got somebody who struggles with physical handwriting, we need to develop their gross motor skills first. So all these sorts of activities, these big actions that we're doing, climbing, hopscotch, martial arts, any sport, throwing and catching, running and jumping, anything that they do big movements with, are our gross motor skills. And that does feed massively into the development of our fine motor skills. So anything we can do with our hands, so baking and cooking, mixing, squeezing, rolling, flattening things, all those kind of things we can do with our hands, threading, anything. Again, often these things are based with the sort of associated with the early years, but actually our children who are moving up in key stage 1, key stage 2, and maybe beyond, they need to develop those hand muscles to help develop the handwriting. So when we put our pens away for the week, there are certain students who still need to develop their handwriting skills, but there's other ways that we can do that and support that without picking up a pen if it's a barrier to them. Lots of you might have heard of or seen, so Play-Doh is fantastic for lots of those things that I mentioned with baking. So the mixing, the rolling, the squeezing, those kind of things. And Play-Doh is ideal for that. There's Dough Discos on YouTube. It's free to access. There's songs and different themes, so sort of superheroes or nursery rhymes or just other general topic areas that your child might be interested in. And it's the use of, and you have a bit of Play-Doh and you do it along with whatever's on the screen, to the music or to the pattern or the beat or whatever they're doing. And again, those skills of developing those fine motor skills are helping a young person or a learner without picking up a pen. Not all handwriting improvements needs to be done with a pen in hand. That is very important for the formation and things, but there are other ways, other supports that we can do. When we talk about these barriers of picking up a pen, this is huge for lots of young people. Lots of them are frightened of making a mistake. So if they can't have a rubber or they're given a pen and they can't undo their mistake, that may bring anxiety and worries in other ways. That's why lots of children and young people like to use whiteboards, because if they've made an error, it's easy to get rid of. It's an easy fix in terms of getting rid of that mistake. So there are lots of other, that is including a pen, but I'm just talking about those barriers of why we might not be, that why somebody may be reluctant to pick up a pen and start writing. There's other ways that we can get information down without using a pen. So typing is something, again, as a charity, we really push with our students. The technology that our children are exposed to will only continue to develop as they get older, and whatever sort of role or job they go into in the future, they will need to use some type of computer or word processing device, I guess. And there's loads of things out there that can help support with that. If people are conscious, or children are conscious of their handwriting, are they more willing to type? If they use a computer regularly at home, they may have really good typing skills already. But again, there are things out there that can help support with that and teach them to type properly, I guess, where they're using to make it more dynamic for them, and they're using the right fingers in the right places to improve speed and things like that. The dance mat typing is through the BBC Bite Size website, and that is a free one to access. The typing club is also free to access, but there's lots of paid ones. You know, there may be other ones out there that are more suitable for you or your child, that you think may be of value to them. But as I say, there are things out there that are free and accessible to support that. I've talked a lot about speaking and listening and things like that. So if you have Microsoft on your computer, there is a function that not everybody knows about. It is a function that is always there. You don't have to pay anything additional to it. And it's called the dictate function. You click dictate on and you talk to your computer, and it will type whatever it is, your wonderful ideas, your lovely vocabulary, it'll type it out for you. There are some difficulties that come alongside with using dictate. So if you've got a strong Hull accent like I have, it doesn't like it, and there's certain words, it's quite interesting to see what it thinks I'm trying to say. So you do have to go back and check this and look through it. It doesn't put punctuation in unless you tell it to. So if you say full stop, it will put a full stop in for you, but you need to be explicit and tell it to do that. If you've got children or a child who is reluctant to pick up a pen but have got these fantastic ideas in their head, they may then start to feel, oh, well, I'm not as good as my friend sat next to me, I can't do it, and lots of these negative feelings start coming out. if you could show them how to use dictate, and they can get their ideas out using the vocabulary, using their understanding, without having to worry about handwriting and spelling and things, you might see a difference in their confidence in terms of, actually, I can do this. I have got these fantastic ideas. I have got the knowledge that my peers have got next to me. I just get it down in a different way. And I think this is the exciting thing about technology. As our children are getting older, things are becoming more accessible to them. There are lots of other ways that you can use dictate facilities. So there's apps you can buy, there's toolbars, there's toolbars that do it as well. Lots of them come with a cost, but as I say, Microsoft has it there. It's free once you've got Microsoft, and it is really valuable. And it's amazing when you get a child or a young person talking, how much information they can get down on paper, which, you know, they haven't once picked up a pen, but they're showing their knowledge and their understanding of a topic or a particular area. I think a lot of what I'm trying to say today is, you know, there's lots of fun things that we can do to help support our children with vocabulary and learning and writing and spelling without having to sit down at a table with a pen. And I think for dyslexic learners in particular, that is really important of how we can develop their skills as they're getting older. So thank you. That's everything that I'm going to say today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm just going to stop my recording.